LittleBigPlanet's 100% speedrun is something that has only become relevant relatively recently, with the first completed run being set in just 2021, 13 years after the game's release. But in my opinion, this is the most fun and interesting category that there is on any of the LBP leaderboards, which only a few people have even completed. In this video, I'm going to be talking about what this run is, how it works, and what makes it so rewarding and challenging, with its long list of exclusive strats and unintended routes, all while using only one controller. This is 100% No Overlord. To complete a 100% speedrun, we have to finish all 55 levels in the story mode, collect all of the prizes including the scoreboard rewards, and also ace all of the levels, except for the 8 survival games. We're basically just getting all 3 badges on each world icon. Except, funnily, you can actually get all of the badges for a world but not have everything in it, because of how the rewards that come from the scoreboard don't actually contribute to the prize badge. You can do this if you come back to a level after finishing it, collect the rest of the prizes, then leave without finishing, giving you the prize badge, but not the scoreboard prizes. So we just need to make sure to touch the scoreboard if this ever happens in a level. Otherwise the run is invalid since we don't have everything. The only thing that we don't really need to collect are the prizes for finishing the create mode tutorials, which might seem weird to not include, but that's how it is. So I guess we should talk about what Overlord is, so we can make sure that we don't accidentally do it or anything, since that's what no means. On the simplest level, Overlord is a glitch that allows Sackboy to take any object into any area of the game. This is done by going into create mode and attaching an emitter to Sackboy that contains the desired objects, which can be done during a small window of his spawn animation. The most common things that are brought from create mode are jetpacks and scoreboards, allowing you to finish any level instantly or fly anywhere you want. And while the emitter is probably all you'll ever need, pretty much any tool that attaches to a surface like this can also be put on him while still maintaining its function, such as music, sound effects, bolts, lighting and water sensors, mouths, eyes, player grab and sticker sensors, paint sensors, cameras, key switches, and more. You can even attach things that have wire connections, letting you activate something by grabbing Sackboy or even putting a sticker on him, or activating something that's on him through something else, which is all pretty weird. You could even put both things on 2 different Sack people, making for a pretty unique contraption that completely breaks if either of them die, because also, whatever's attached to Sackboy gets removed if he dies, or just spawns at the wrong time. But anyway, any kind of use of this glitch is banned for this category, forcing us to play the story levels with only what they have to offer themselves without external influence. But that's what makes this run so interesting. There is also the ghost glitch, which lets you remove all collision from Sackboy to let you go through walls, and also the floor, which could be useful in some situations, but it's actually any kind of create mode glitch that isn't allowed, so we won't be using this either. The only other main rule for this category is that we're only allowed to use one controller the entire time, which is probably confusing if you're familiar with this game, due to the various side areas across most of the main levels that are made to be completed with more than one player, which we have to do because all of them give you prizes. This seems pretty hopeless at first, but as it turns out, just by going into the PS3's controller settings menu and switching your controller number, you're able to spawn an additional Sack person to help out with whatever you need. And since we still only have one controller connected the entire time, this is completely valid as there's no rule about how many Sack people there can be at once, it's only about the controller. So if you needed to, you could actually spawn up to 4 of them at once. The 2 main struggles with this though is that you can only control one of them at a time. So if you needed to grab 2 things at once or move multiple Sackboys at the same time or something, you wouldn't be able to. You have to alternate between controlling them. The other issue is that once a Sack person doesn't have a controller connected to them for 10 seconds, they automatically despawn. Which isn't a super big problem, it just means that we need to make sure to refresh that timer every so often by reselecting that controller number from the menu for a moment. And thankfully, it's enough just to do it in this menu. We don't need to return to the game or anything. So hopefully, this controller switching technique will be enough to get us through all 27 multiplayer sections. So with all of those rules and requirements, let's see what an actual 100% run looks like with the order of levels and route that we have to take to do all of it as efficiently as possible. And don't worry if anything doesn't make sense now, it will soon. Now, the most ideal way to play through the game is that for every level, we just try to both collect everything and ace it in a single visit without restarting to get in and out as fast as possible, avoiding the need to come back for anything. But if you try this, every now and then you'll find a level where you just can't. And for only one reason: sticker sensors. These are a common thing that you'll encounter throughout the game, where placing the right sticker on a surface like this will trigger something to reward you with prizes, so they're not something you can skip. The problem is just that sometimes, the sticker that you need doesn't actually get given to you until a later level, forcing you to do a revisit once you do obtain it, which wastes a lot of time because you can't just go back, get the prizes, and leave. You have to actually finish the level again to get those scoreboard prizes that we talked about earlier. And unfortunately, all 3 main gardens levels have a sticker sensor like this, but that's not to say that there isn't anything you can do about it. So after doing the introduction, the sticker sensor in First Steps is actually the only one in the game that doesn't give you prizes, as it instead allows you to get the ace with how it skips the whole to retry pit. But in a speedrun, a gap like this is nowhere near impossible to jump over ourselves. So to skip having to play this level twice entirely, you can just get a high enough jump to go over the whole thing. But upon reaching Get a Grip, you'll find heaps of these star sticker sensors that you can't really do anything about, especially with how many there are. Then the exact same thing can be said about Skate to Victory, where it's at the end of this level that you get the star sticker. But before we replay Get a Grip now that we have it, what's this other sticker sensor that's found halfway through this level? Well, it doesn't actually come from anywhere within the story, as it's instead a reward for completing one of the Create Mode tutorials, which definitely gives the run some more variety. So after finishing Skate to Victory, we head into Create Mode to play through only the first 3 tutorials, where our sticker is awarded to us after the music one. From here we return to Get a Grip and Skate to Victory, now going through and collecting all of the prizes and keys that we didn't get before, which is easier if we get the ace on the first visit, but even if we didn't, we have another opportunity to do that now. Then after finishing all of the main levels, we play through the 3 minigames while acing them, where the Gardens is now completely finished. And with that walkthrough of the first world, we can now go through the route for the rest of them a bit faster, with the Savannah being next. Swinging Safari is one that's pretty easy to finish in one go, but because of this one prize behind the sticker sensor in Burning Forest, we'll need to do a revisit after finishing the Meerkat Kingdom and getting the sticker from there. Thankfully, Burning Forest isn't too long though. Then there's a few more minigames in the Savannah than the Gardens because of the seesaw levels, where it's then time for the wedding. Luckily, there aren't actually any revisits here at all, being able to 100% all 3 levels in one go to then do the minigames. There is one sticker sensor in the wedding reception that you can't activate at first, but you get the sticker for it almost straight afterwards, so it's easy to backtrack without restarting. The Canyons also doesn't have any revisits, which is nice because it has some long levels, but it wasn't always like that. Boomtown is completed as usual, but it's upon reaching the end of the mines where there used to be problems, as the sticker for this sensor isn't unlocked until Serpent Shrine. But while this category was getting routed, it was found that performing a deload on the nearby checkpoint, a trick that can remove the collision of certain objects, you can actually change layer into the wall that the prizes are behind, letting you easily collect them without the sticker. And while it might not look like much, doing this actually saves more than 3 minutes, since it completely avoids needing to play the level again, which by the way is the longest in the game. It's just really easy to get stuck somewhere inside of the wall while you're doing it, which eventually kills you, so you have to be careful. The rest of the world is then completed without many more issues, including the 3 extra minigames. Lowrider is a funny one because there's a sticker sensor right at the beginning that you don't get until towards the end of the level. So while it's not technically a revisit, we do still restart the level shortly after getting the sticker, to then get all of the prizes. Which is inconvenient, but it's the best way to do it. Then for Subway, there are the 2 elevators at the beginning and end of the level that you can't even collect everything in first try with 1 player. But it doesn't really matter because there's a sticker sensor partway through that we don't get until the construction site, so we need to play the level twice for that anyway, letting us get everything on the elevators then. We also just have to get this 1 sticker in the vent section on the first visit of Subway for the construction site, which is a pretty easy level and so are the minigames. Endurance Dojo is annoying because we actually need 2 different stickers for it that we don't get until later, and both are actually used right at the end of the level. So we just try to ace it on the first visit, then come back once we've done the next 2 levels and have everything that we need, both of which thankfully only need to be played once. There's just one sticker switch in the Terrible volcano that you have to backtrack for once you get the prize for it, but it's better than needing to replay the level as a whole. Then the minigames are easy enough. The Dancer's Court is actually very similar to Lowrider, with how a sticker that we need at the very beginning isn't found until halfway through the level. But instead of restarting as soon as we get the sticker, we can actually do a skip right here to just touch the scoreboard, to then restart so that we don't need to worry about the ace anymore. Then in Elephant Temple, you pretty much immediately run into a sticker switch that you can't activate until later. But thankfully, just by doing a difficult bounce jump, you can get up to the prizes, skipping another whole revisit just with one jump. The Great Magician's Palace is thankfully fine, and so are the minigames. The Frozen Tundra is another one with the required sticker being found later in the level, with the one for the gear here being found just after the icicle section, so thankfully it's easy enough just to backtrack up to the sensor. Then in the bunker, another entire revisit gets skipped just by doing another bounce jump to get onto the tank, since the fifth sticker isn't collected until the next level, the Collector's Lair, which by the way is pretty much the last full level with a lot of prizes, that we can also finish in a single visit. After this, the Collector is defeated, and the last 3 minigames are played through, bringing the run to an end. This makes the only times that we have to play any levels non-linearly as follows: playing the tutorials once they unlock, then revisiting Get a Grip and Skate to Victory, revisiting Burning Forest, having to restart Lowrider, revisiting Subway, revisiting Endurance Dojo, and restarting the Dancer's Court. All revisits being done straight after the main levels of that world are finished, and getting the ace on the first visit so that we have more options when we come back. So this is where the biggest potential for time save in this category would be really, because being able to avoid any of these restarts or revisits would save minutes. So let's go through them while we're here and see what's possible. Like I mentioned before, there isn't a lot you can do in Get a Grip just because of how many times you need to use the star sticker, as well as how high up the prizes are. The exact same thing applies to Skate to Victory, but even just being able to skip the other sticker switch would still be super helpful, because it would at least mean avoiding the tutorials and create mode as a whole. Well, the prizes are enclosed in a box, so you'd probably need to find a way to get heaps of speed to clip inside. And we do have easier access to the reload glitch with having unlocked the Savannah at this point, but with how thick the wood is above the prizes, as well as all of the structures above and around it, you would need both an incredibly precise angle and an insane amount of speed to get through. But I can't yet say that it's impossible. The Burning Forest sticker switch has a similar problem, where the single prize is trapped in an enclosed space, and again, it's not really easy for Sackboy to go through walls. The only potential I see here would be trying to get one of the big flings off the crocs found later in the level to somehow land precisely in this spot, then drop down in time to use your speed to go through the wall, but I don't really see this happening. The prizes in the Lowrider aren't enclosed, they're just really high up with nothing to climb on to get there, so it'll probably come down to getting a really big fling off something again. Well, we know that it's possible to manipulate the mags at the end of the level in the right way to send you all the way back to the entrance, so it might be possible to land right where the prizes are, but no one's actually done it, and I've only seen a fling like this once. So I kind of doubt how possible, let alone viable it is. The Subway prizes are more ones that are inside of a box, except this time there really isn't any way to approach it at all to potentially clip inside, so this one's pretty hopeless. And this is why I said Endurance Dojo was annoying for including 2 sticker sensors that you can't activate, because one of them actually has a lot of potential. There is a roof covering the prizes at the very end of the level, but there's also a tiny crack just above them, preceded by a massive vertical drop. So by doing some parkour to get to the highest point above this area, it's actually barely possible to slide through the gap to get the prizes without the sticker. But as cool as this is, it's completely useless because of the other sticker sensor found slightly earlier, whose prizes are super high up in the air and completely unreachable, forcing us to replay the whole level, despite being able to skip the other one. Then for the Dancer's Court, it's another case of finding a way to clip inside of the box, but with how little space this entire area has, I really don't think anything's possible. There is some weird stuff with layer changing that happens sometimes that seems kind of useful, but I'm not really sure if it applies here. So it doesn't look like the route will be changing anytime soon, but we could be wrong. In my opinion though, the restarts, revisits, and especially the tutorials make the category a lot more interesting than if all the levels were just played once in a linear order, because it actually introduces some more strats and options when considering both visits of a level, such as death abusing, with only needing to get the ace and collect everything at least once. There are even strats for completing the tutorials a little faster, which we will get into, but I think it's time to talk about the next biggest challenge that comes with this category. Collecting all of the prizes in a level is not normally something that would be very troubling, since if you have enough players, it's really just about finding where everything is rather than having to execute collecting them. Which anybody could do given enough time, but as mentioned in the rules, we're restricted to using only one controller at a time, making the sections where you normally need several players at once a lot more difficult to execute. But we wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't possible. So here is how we complete every multiplayer area in the game with only a single controller. Skate to Victory is easily the simplest, as all it requires is 2 buttons to be pressed at the same time. So all we do is switch controller numbers to spawn another player, make them press the button, then switch back to our main player to press the other one. This is where getting the ace on the first visit of the level to then do this section on the second is useful, because it means that you don't need to worry about the extra player dying to the ghost, which usually happens. You can actually make it up to the second button in Swinging Safari on your own, but there's not much point since we just send another player up there like normal for us to then get the rest of the prizes after they press the button. Also, it's important to know that because of the camera in this area, you have to spawn the extra player before going in because of how the checkpoint goes off screen, and it's also really easy to have that player die from being off screen if you leave too early, since any player dying loses the ace. So you can just pause the game and wait for them to despawn if you need to. The Burning Forest one is kind of cool because once you put another player on the button, it's just barely possible to get in and out before they despawn by pulling down the sponge to make the platform lower, then doing an LTJ off the block to make it up. Even if you can't get up in time though, you don't need to worry about the other player despawning, since when you're done you can just hold to retry to get out, which we can do since it's on the second visit of the level and we already have the ace. The Meerkat Kingdom one is similar, where once we use the extra player to just get us in, we can forget about them. Since instead of having another player hold it, if you manage to get on the left side of the block, you can push it out enough to quickly get a jump before it gets pulled back in, where the player center then lets you out. The most important thing to know about this one is that if you try to get behind the block without moving it, you'll end up getting squished because of how the ceiling is angled. So instead, you just have to pull it out as far as it can go without moving back. Then a bit later in the level, you have to spawn another player to launch you off the big meerkats, but that's easy. You're even meant to do it again in the party room, but it's fastest to use Stripey Tail to get up, then use the lights to get the prize. The wedding reception one doesn't even require controller switching, which is funny, where you can reach the sponge from the ledge if you get a good enough jump. But this rarely happens, so instead, on the ladder, you can get a jump off the first sponge to grab the second, pull it down, then grab the third before it goes back up, to then grab the main sponge. The Darkness ×2 area is super tedious with the 3 mid-air prizes and the other ones being to the left. First, the extra player grabs the skull, then the main player has to jump immediately after switching back to make it up in time. From here, they go all the way to the left, where thankfully, it's pretty easy to do a trip jump next to the button to get over the wall, which gets the first set of prizes. After this, we climb back up, go to the right and drop down onto the first prize along. Then we use an extra player to get up like before to get the second prize. Then the good thing is from here, the final prize is actually close enough to get using the lower skull to swing over. It's just really hard to avoid the spikes because the skull hangs at the perfect height to not let Sackboy walk on the ground, but also not let him move through the air, which is pretty stupid, but you can avoid this by grabbing the side of the skull. This is definitely one of the more stressful multiplayer areas, with having to jump over all of the spikes without being able to see much. Especially because spikes are probably the worst hazard in the game with how big their hitboxes are. There's also another very small ×2 area a bit later, where thankfully all you need to do is LTJ off of Don Lu to make it up. It's just really hard to do a corner jump off of a circle sometimes because where even is a circle's corner? So you usually just need to try a few times to get it, but it's not too bad. Boomtown is silly. I mean, it probably has one of the coolest solutions to one of these considering how convoluted the intended method is with carrying the bombs around in the minecarts. I'm not even sure how possible it is to do it that way with controller switching, but the alternative is a lot easier anyway. Because all of the prizes are just sitting in the bank, and we actually have access to 5 bombs that we can freely move around and detonate whenever we want, we can just position them in front of the bank, and then press the button to also blow up the bombs that are inside, causing the prizes to fall down and avoiding the minecarts. After this, we can just go down and collect everything. The only problem is that 2 of the prizes fall into the spike pit, which seems like we would need to restart to keep the ace, but there is a solution. We jump in, collect both prizes, then pause the game just before we die and turn off our controller. Then once Sackboy despawns, we'll be out of the pit while maintaining the ace and still having the prizes, since despawning does not count as a death, which is much faster than restarting. So yeah, you can totally just save yourself with this at any moment throughout the game, where you just pause, turn off the controller and wait for the despawn, which is insanely useful for saving the ace, where dying would cost minutes. It's really useful in first steps as well if you fail the jump over the pit, since it's basically a way to hold to retry without dying. Anyway, Boomtown has another significant ×2 area, where instead of going back and forth switching between controller numbers, we can just put 4 bombs into the tunnel as the main player, then use an extra player to get us into the other side to use them. From here we can forget about the other player and complete the rest of the section on our own as intended, with the lever letting us escape. We just have to make sure to not accidentally blow up all of the bombs at once. There's a very small multiplayer section in the mines that's very easy to do on your own, just by pushing the lever as you jump. That's it. The second one in this level is a bit more interesting though. Just by the deload, there's a part where you're meant to grab 2 things at once to get through. But as we know, this is impossible to do in our situation. So instead, we can just have our extra player stand on the wood to lift the lock, where it's easy for us to get in. Then the next part with the levers is also impossible to do normally, but thankfully it's super easy just to do an LTJ to get straight up to the prizes. A faster way to do the first part though, which is a bit harder, is to grab the top sponge as you're falling past from a jump, to then drop down to grab the lower sponge just in time, completely avoiding the extra player. Serpentine is another super stressful one, where normally you're expected to throw yourself into the serpent's tunnel, relying on another player to save you from death several times. So yeah, a lot of cooperation is needed here, which we don't have. There's really not any way to do this without significantly risking the ace, as it's pretty hard to save yourself. But the strategy is pretty consistent. We place the extra player on the second button, then as the main player, while making sure the other doesn't despawn, we enter the tunnel as soon as the serpent goes past, and perfectly time a jump underneath the raised sponge to get boosted up to it by the serpent's fire. Then from here, we quickly do the sequence of events as soon as it goes past. We fall down, switch to the other player, jump to land on the next button, then press the PS button to open the XMB, immediately pausing the game. While we're in this menu, we can switch back to the main player, then return to the game, to quickly jump and grab the sponge just before the other player lands on the button, pulling us up to safety, finishing the section, and letting us grab the prizes. This one is pretty hard, but in my opinion, it's also one of the most fun sections to do properly. The only thing that makes this a bit easier is that if you hold a button while the XMB is closing, it actually freezes everything until the moment you let go of the button, letting you time the jump to grab the last sponge a lot easier. Lowrider is another slightly challenging one, but you are at least able to take your time with it. It's actually super convenient that this level involves a restart because it's really useful being able to die when doing this section. And since this area is pretty much right next to the sticker for the sensor at the start of the level, no time is really lost getting over to it. But anyway, this one doesn't require controller switching, where to get the prizes, you drive the car over enough so that when you go down, it's enough to swing all the way to the other side. The electricity does get in the way a bit, but it's actually good that it's there because it gives the sponge a lot of momentum. We then pull the lever to open the door, then jump into the gas while collecting the prize. The car then gets driven over to the next level while collecting the prizes, where then after going down again, we can swing over, collect the final prize and restart the level, where then the ace is completed, and that sticker sensor can now be activated. It doesn't matter which visit the Subway ×2 area is done on, as there's not really much risk involved. After spawning another player to get both of them through the spinning vent, the whole puzzle can actually be skipped just by doing an LCJ off the lever, just not while it's in its default position. If you try doing it like this, you won't get enough height, so we have to instead have another player stand on it to push it over just a little bit. Either that, or you can try quickly doing it after pushing it around yourself, but this is harder. It is still a really tight jump to get, but it is possible and much better than going through the intended way. The most annoying thing about it is just having to constantly refresh the other player's controller status so they don't despawn, if you do it that way. The construction site actually has a couple of options for its multiplayer area, where the main issue is just getting these out of reach prizes without the sponge block. The first way is just to spawn another player and do a couple of co-op jumps to get everything, which is straightforward but hard if you haven't learnt it. Then the second way, which is probably faster, is to do a bounce jump to get the rightmost prize, then do another one from the back layer, to then climb up all the way, where you're able to just fall onto the prizes. This way is still a bit hard because the bounce jumps are a little precise, but there's actually no risk of falling on the second one since there's a wall right next to you. Anyway, to complete the section, you just move the platform into the middle using the lever, where it's then easy to jump over to get the prize, then jump back. If you want, you can actually go through the window by grabbing the lever, which I think is funny. Endurance Dojo is one that's a lot better to do on the second visit, and you'll see why. The first part is pretty straightforward, where you just use another player to lift the main one up, who then gets the prizes in the wheel. Then, instead of having to do the rest of it properly, which would involve a lot of switching back and forth between players, because for some reason there just isn't a roof in the back layer of the box containing the prizes, we can just use this green platform found later to get onto this red structure, where it's then easy enough to jump across the golden pillars, getting over to the box to collect the prizes. It's just important that we activate the checkpoint that's next to the race gate before doing this, so that we can hold to retry to get out and continue. Sensei's Lost Castle is very easy. After swinging up, all you really have to do is drag the sponge with the key over, do an LCJ off of it, then RCJ to collect the prizes, where you then take the sponge with you to get the prize after this. The only challenges with this section is that, again, it's kind of annoying having to do a corner jump off of a circle, and it can be pretty easy to accidentally touch the shuriken if you're not careful. The Terribaloni's Volcanoes ×2 area is pretty much done as intended, just with controller switching and a couple of despawns, where after the main player gets past the first obstacle, the second player is despawned, then brought back to get onto the car. After they collect the prizes, they're despawned again, then used one final time to let the main player out of the area. And now we have the first ×4 area in the Dancer's Court, which is another hard one, but thankfully it doesn't actually require us to use 4 sack people at once, although it is the first time we need to use 3. Just getting over to the area can be annoying because of the moving platforms. For some reason there just isn't a checkpoint over there. So we just put each player on their own platform and get them over one at a time. And when there's more than 2 players, we pretty much just refresh all of their despawn timers whenever we're in the menu for it, just to be safe. Once we're here, we put the main player +1 on the left platform, then put the third one on the button. Then we LCJ both of these players up to the center button, which is probably the hardest part just because of the jump timing and needing all of the players to not despawn. Once they are here though, we can forget about both extra players and use our main player to climb up to the left to get those prizes, then the rest once the other players despawn while standing on the lowered platform. Then since we got the ace before restarting the level earlier, we can now hold to retry to instantly get back to the main path. This one is really just scary because of the player management and how far away the checkpoint is, where if any of the 3 players despawn too early, you have to go through the whole process of getting them over there again. And now Elephant Temple, which is by far the most significant multiplayer area in the game, because of how for a long time, it was the thing that made this category almost impossible to do and why it took so long for the first run to be completed. With the reason it was such a big problem being that to enter the ×2 area normally, you have to grab 2 sponges at once, which we know is impossible with one controller. And it's not like the mines where you can use your weight to do anything, since the grab sensors are what trigger the door. There was a way to avoid this for a long time, as I did say it was almost impossible, but actually doing it is just so hard and inconsistent. It involves taking a specific route after getting out of bounds earlier in the level with 2 players, which means controller switching the entire time, where once making it to above the moving boxes, it's possible to use the extra player to block a layer change by grabbing them at the right time, which lets you fall behind the level into the ×2 area. The timing for the grab though is just so precise and probably depends on a lot of other things too. Plus, you have to time it with the box cycle. So yeah, no one was doing this. It's only because of how the enclosure for the ×2 area itself doesn't actually have a back layer on part of it, is how a new strat was found to allow the entire category to be viable, which was discovered by the player Frit. Where, because the checkpoint on the elephant that's above this area is in the back layer, what you can do is connect another player to spawn, then while holding grab, activate the checkpoint. With this, you grab the spawning player, moving you to the back layer as well, where you can then let go, fall to the left and fire boost behind the wall into the ×2 area. But before we do the puzzle here, we just have to switch back to the extra player to collect the prizes and the key that are on the auto-scroller before the elephant walks too far, if it was activated. Now we switch back to the main player, where after pulling the lever to the right, it's pretty easy to jump into it to push it back and then immediately do a drop down onto the lowering platform to quickly jump up and collect the prizes. And it's important that we don't touch the checkpoint that's down here, so that we can now just despawn our main player to get back up to the main route. So while doing all of this isn't actually that hard, Elephant Temple is always going to be known for having the coolest solution to a multiplayer area, just because of its history. Also, dying or messing up any of this is pretty much an instant restart because of how the elephant walks away, stopping you from trying again. The Great Magician's Palace is definitely the most input-heavy multiplayer section because of how there's no way to skip the climb up using the blocks. The way it's done is, starting with the right side, the second player presses the button once, then presses the other one on the other side twice, where the main player then stands on the highest one. Then the button on the right side is pressed twice, and the main player jumps onto them. Then this gets repeated on alternating sides, until we can make it to the top with an RTJ. From here, we can just respawn the extra player after getting the checkpoint to avoid doing that again. Then a bit of the next section is skipped. We take both players along the lower path until the fire, RTJ both of them up, then continue to the next fire. Then to finish, which is quite tight with the blocks disappearing, one player quickly drops down, climbs the stairs and collects the prizes, for us to then switch to the other player to climb up the blocks that spawned just in time, getting the prizes and completing the area. So even though parts of this section are skipped, it's still quite challenging because you need to consider the time that it takes for the controller settings menu to appear, since after holding in the button, it takes 1 second for it to come up. So a lot of the time, you need to be holding the button while still doing the last of a player's actions, since if you wait to hold the button until after you're done moving, you're basically losing a second every time for all of the block's lifetimes, which you can't afford, leading to you having to start over. The Frozen Tundra is the only one that you actually do need 4 individual sack people for, but thankfully you don't really need to do much with them. They're only needed to activate the elevator, where once all of the buttons are pressed, you really only need to refresh their timers once. Then once you reach the top, you're normally expected to grab each of the 4 wheels all at the same time. And if we can't grab 2 things at once with one controller, we probably can't grab 4 things at once. And there isn't actually anything you can do to open the door on your own from this room, but there is something that we can do from earlier in the level. At the beginning of the race, which is in the front layer, if you're able to land on the right part of the ice in the right way, it actually lets you change back a layer where you fall out of bounds. And if you fall down to the right spot, you can actually land right on the logic that controls the door and the emitters for the ×4 area. And while we can't make these things dissolve, we can activate what we need to by knocking off the left one, then pulling over the other 2 so that they turn on the keys next to them, which opens the door and fires the rockets. From here, we despawn ourselves by disconnecting our controller. Then when we make it up to that section later using the 4 players, we can freely collect all of the prizes. This is definitely one of the cooler multiplayer areas to skip, simply because of the logic abuse. But honestly, it's one of the worst parts of the run to get up to because of how inconsistent the layer change is to get out of bounds. Sometimes you'll just miss it 6 times in a row, where climbing up the hill to try again takes forever. And there's no alternative, so you just have to keep going until you get it. Sometimes there's also a chance where one of the prizes can get stuck up high after the rockets go off. How am I meant to get that? But since there's a checkpoint nearby, you can do a co-op jump to climb up and save it if you have to. That was so dumb, oh my god. The bunker has a ×2 and a ×3 area joined together, so we just do them at the same time, which is pretty much completed as intended. It can just be confusing remembering what each lever and button does, but this is the process. One player, who isn't the main one, goes into the bottom right, pulls the lever, then does the same for the bottom left. The other 2 players then enter the top right and pull that lever, where the lever in the bottom left is then pulled again for the non-main player to go into the top left, standing on the button. The bottom left now pulls that lever for a 3rd time, letting them get those prizes, where the main player now pulls their lever in the top right, letting the player in the top left get the rest of the prizes. And now since we kept the main player here, we can just leave straight away, where the other 2 players simply despawn. It's pretty important not to mess this one up by having players despawn by mistake, because you can actually make it impossible to fix, but it's really not that hard. And now for the final one in the Collector's Lair, which is a ×4 area. The main player stands on the top button, then 2 more players press the 2 buttons below this, which is actually enough for the main player to get up. You don't need 4 players at all. You just have to make sure that the other 2 players despawn after getting off. Otherwise the platform will crush them and you'll lose the ace. And dying in this level can even be more punishing than usual, because unless you collect their prizes at the end before restarting, you'll need to go back through and pull all of the levers for the story characters again. And that's all of them. These are definitely what gives a lot of the run so much difficulty, especially in the canyons and the temples. But honestly, it makes it all so much more interesting and fun to do with how many of the solutions are completely unintended. It's kind of amazing that every single one is actually possible too, since if even one wasn't, then this category wouldn't really exist, which is actually the case for LBP2, where even the first one in the game just can't be done with these rules in place. But now that we've explained all of the questionable parts of the run, with the sticker switches and now the multiplayer areas, there really isn't any more information that someone would need to be able to finish a run, as the rest of the game can pretty much be finished as intended. But that doesn't mean that it has to be. There's still a lot that can be learnt, with the tons of cool and unintended strats that save a lot of time throughout a run that I'm going to go through the most significant ones for now. A pretty common thing found in a lot of levels is a way to actually despawn yourself a lot faster instead of waiting for the 10 seconds after your controller turns off. It works because when connecting to PSN results in a failure, the game instantly despawns anyone who doesn't have a controller connected to them, and we can cause this failure easily just by pressing the friends button in the pause menu and cancelling the connection attempt. So for example, in the frozen tundra, after we move the keys around for the ×4 area, we can switch to a higher controller number to disconnect our main player, then use the new player to cause the respawn to happen, since it's the player with the highest controller number that gets control over the pause menu. Then once we've despawned, we can switch back to the main player's control number and continue. We also do the same thing after the Elephant Temple ×2 area. The only thing is that you do have to wait for the other player to despawn, which is fine as long as you don't get them timed out off screen. And this also can't really be done when you need to save yourself because the game needs to be unpaused when you do the controller switch, which you probably don't have time to do. You also don't get access to these buttons on the pause menu until the Savannah is unlocked. But we also use this connection failure a lot when we just don't need our extra player anymore when doing other strats. Like after the Swinging Safari ×2 area and the bunker one, during the one for Terribiloni's volcano, and especially in the Collector's Lair to stop the other players from being crushed. It can even be used to speed up a deload, like in the mines. But anyway, here are some more level exclusive strats. Since Gate to Victory needs to be played twice anyway, we can actually do the reload skip on the first visit like in any % runs instead of playing it normally. The only thing that's different is that we still need to get the star sticker for when these levels are revisited. But doing this skip normally makes us switch to a guest for it, and for prizes to count, the main player needs to be present when they're collected. It's not too hard to switch to the main player just before the fling happens, but if you don't, the star sticker needs to be avoided until reaching a checkpoint, where we then switch back to the main player, collect the sticker and finish. The skip also lets us ace the level easily, which is good because there's a number of death abusers on the second visit. Such as, after getting the prizes next to the hill, we can drop into the gas to get back faster, we don't need to worry about the player dying in the ×2 area, then for the stickers after the ramp, we can slope jump down without the skateboard, then after we get both of the ones on the tree and the one all the way to the left, we can hold to retry to then take the skateboard down as usual. It's also just really fun being able to explore and play more of the game, with collecting keys, playing minigames, and just doing all of the parts that are normally skipped in other categories. I definitely think that having a pre-existing understanding of the game's story mode from playing the game casually helps a lot with this run. Which I say because I 100%ed the game more than a few times when I was younger, which I think helps me do this category. The tutorials themselves also have some strats in them, with how when stacking the cardboard the orientation doesn't actually matter, and the music sliders don't need to be maxed out. Just make sure to use the D-pad here since it increases faster with it. In Get a Grip there's a chance you'll grab the prize behind this tree without changing layer, which is convenient but it doesn't happen often. There's also a cool little LCJ to get the last prize quickly. If you do the start of Swinging Safari well enough, you can pretty much get through without having to wait for the giraffe cycles at all with how well they line up, which is satisfying because they take forever to move. Towards the end of the level, there's another pretty cool LCJ you can do to avoid some backtracking, where you knock over the sponges next to Zola, which can let you get onto the branches straight away instead of going around like usual. But because of how small the sponges are, it's kind of hard. This level also just has a lot of split paths in general, which can make it easy to miss certain prizes. But it also just makes it more fun being able to explore in so many areas. Another thing that's consistent throughout the run is the rooster sound effects whenever you collect the last prize in a level. There's nothing like stressing over whether you missed a prize or not for the duration of a level, only to hear the rooster at the end to instantly be relieved of all of your worries. I mean, you could check the prize percentage in the level details if you know what the number should be, but this is hard to keep track of. The only time that I do this is when there should only be one prize left, so the percentage should be around 98, and in Lowrider where after the restart and getting the sticker switch prizes, it should be at 91% if you got everything up to that point. Even though I didn't say there was a restart for Burning Forest, it's still useful to do it after you go to the left and get the key. 1, because you don't need to backtrack, 2, because it resets the cycles in the level to what you might be used to, and 3, it maintains the ace if you need it, rather than death abusing to get back. Kind of like in Swinging Safari, there's another hard strat where you can get onto the branches early to avoid needing to backtrack by using one of the crocs. It's pretty random, but having the ace already lets you try it without much risk. And if not, you can also try jumping across the sponges to skip grabbing one later. Another minor thing you can do on this level is on the first visit you can get the prize at the very end, so that on the second playthrough you can know that you've gotten everything a little bit earlier when you hear the rooster, which I guess you can do on any level that has a revisit. One thing that's nice to see in runs again is the old skip found in the Meerkat Kingdom, where you go out of bounds by changing layer to skip the race after you get the one prize that's in it, which is minor but it's still cool. Another small thing in this level is the jump after you get the cow stickers to go over the spikes and the sponge, landing on the platform seamlessly. It's also nice being able to collect these prizes without changing layer, and it's funny that in this level, the rooster sound effect plays when you get the chicken sticker. And while the bouncy meerkats at the end can be kind of annoying to use sometimes, when they do exactly what you want, it's so satisfying and fast. Because we have to play through the minigames, it's important to know how to do race gate skips in general, but also how they behave in each level, as surprisingly, it's rarely the same every time. Like for these seesaw levels, you can usually approach it with a small jump, but in Skulldozer, it's super hard to trip over at all for some reason. Then in Endurance Dojo, you have to do a bounce jump instead since it's facing the other way. But then in the mines, which is also facing left, you need to land before the race gate. Just as some examples anyway. You can also always go for this backup by jumping into the corner if you didn't make it, which saves less time, but you may as well go for it. There's actually a larger skip you can do in Tunnel Plunge by landing on top of the race gate, to then jump out of bounds and fall to the scoreboard. But this is pretty hard, so most of the time the regular route is just done. There's also some super cool layer switching bunny hops in the last seesaw level after you get launched. There's also a couple of neat double jump things you can do to get past some of the seesaws faster. It's surprisingly a bit of a challenge sometimes to use the springy platforms in the wedding reception as effectively as possible, with how even the smallest mistime can kill a lot of momentum, but they're still fun to use. Probably one of my favourite respawns in the whole game can be found here too, where after we deliberately avoid this checkpoint, then get that sticker from the balloon section, instead of walking back to the switch to use it, while keeping the ace we can do that thing to instantly despawn ourselves using another player, putting us right next to where we need. I think I find it so cool just because normally this would be a time-consuming problem, but the solution that we use is just so efficient and super easy to do. You can also just bounce up to the dissolve that the skulls are on, but there's no way that this is faster. The prizes found a bit later that are near the elastic can be a little annoying to get sometimes, but if you're able to get a good enough jump from the skull in the previous section, you can actually get them all pretty quickly, which is just so stylish. You can also try using the skulls a bit later on to give you a head start on the springy platforms, since the prizes here are pretty high up, but it's a bit of a gamble. And because these prizes in the wall have a tiny little ledge in the wrong layer in front of them, it can be kind of easy to change layer onto it and fall off. But weirdly, a way to avoid it is to drop down from the springy platform instead. Then moving across the skeleton's hat is fun if you know how to do it, and being able to collect the final two prizes in one go while still landing on the ledge is really nice. In the darkness, we actually have to make sure to not do the usual death abuse of jumping into the spikes to get back to Don Lu faster so that we don't lose the ace. But sometimes even that's hard. Skulldozer is a pretty significant level in this run in my opinion, just because it can all go so wrong so easily with how many prizes love to fall out of bounds, resulting in a restart of the level. For me, the worst prizes are the chest lid, definitely the hat with how it loves to roll away faster than you can run, the rainbow paper material, and the two skulls and torso stickers. Obviously the goal is to get everything in one go without dying, which can be pretty hard with how seemingly random everything is, but there are some strats you can do that help. Like learning to quickly RCJ at the chest, edge jumping or platforming to the hat, which then sets you up to climb the stairs for the paper material, and just being in the right spot for those other three, which really aren't that bad, it's just they occasionally do things that are unexpected. Sometimes if you miss a prize, it can actually be worth it to keep going for a bit to try and at least secure the other hard prizes, or even to save the ace if that's something you need. When you are able to do everything without restarting at all though, there's very little that's more relieving. Boomtown is definitely one of the longest levels in terms of the time it takes to complete, probably because it contains the greatest number of prizes than any other level, so acing it is definitely stressful, but this is the part of the run where that becomes a pretty common theme for each level. There's actually quite a lot of prizes here that are just easy to forget about too, like the ones behind the cacti, this one that you have to jump for that you can barely even see, the one behind the ramp, and also the ones in the jail. There's a pretty funny strat for the sticker sensor area where you can just do the skip using the collector to break into the top of it and collect everything there, which I don't think is actually faster, but it avoids all of the risk of being blown up by mistake, so it's useful for that. The mines being such a long level makes it pretty scary to get the ace too, but the best thing you can do in this category is just take your time if you have to. There's a neat LCJ you can do at the beginning to skip having to go back and forth with the elevator. It's just important to be careful of the enemy, but there is a back player you can use. Missing prizes or the key in any of the minecart rides can be bad, but you can always despawn yourself, and doing these wheel sections can be pretty fun, sometimes even using a fire boost. And again, there's nothing like the anticipation during the auto-scroller at the end of the level to see whether the last prize is really the last one, but you can always check the percentage. This prize is pretty hidden too, so it can be easy to miss if you don't know about it, which is funny because if you did do that, it would take at least another 3 minutes to get back to this point, and the same thing if you died during that auto-scroller. Serpentine is a super cycle heavy level, so it would definitely help a lot to learn how to do it consistently up to a certain point, because like at this bouncy platform, there's a risk of just dying to the snake if you get unlucky with its position since you can't see it. Because some of the serpents are on player sensors though, you'll exit the range for them to spawn while doing the sticker sensor, meaning when you come back, you can usually just jump past all of these gaps without needing to worry because they just haven't respawned yet. The roller run levels are quite fun, but it's also easy to die in them if you're not careful. Their race gates are also some of the hardest in the game to jump because of the angle that they're on. On the surface, Wrestler's Drag appears to be a very simple level, but if you're not careful, it can be very easy to accidentally get crushed by the wrestler, which I don't even know how, but it can even happen right at the end, so be careful otherwise you'll lose 50 seconds. Then in Puzzle Wheel, there's another skip that involves jumping off of a race gate if you can get it quick enough. But it is hard, so you'll usually instead go for a tricky LCJ to get onto the same roof. This LCJ is kind of hard because you need the extra height from the race gate to reach, which isn't lined up with the next jump, then the roof is directly above that too. So you end up doing this little snake movement to make it. This level is already short as intended, so hopefully the skip doesn't take so long that it would have been faster just to do it normally. There's a convenient death abuse you can do in Lowrider, where after activating either of the 2 checkpoints near the bouncy cars, you can hold to retry after getting the prizes that are all the way to the left, which we can do because this level gets restarted later after the ×2 area. You can get onto that roof to the left early from where Mags is, which might be faster, but it's not super useful because there are prizes on the way over here anyway. There is another cool strat though, where you use one of the bouncy cars to weave yourself into where the prizes normally fall out, which is nice because sometimes the prizes can fall pretty far. It's just very precise and not really worth a risk, unfortunately. In Subway, it could actually be faster to do the skip on the first visit, and then just backtrack to get the sticker for the construction site instead of doing the whole thing normally. You would just have to spawn an extra player on the first elevator when you come back to make sure that you get everything. There are also a few prizes that are kind of easy to miss in this level too, like the one to the far left of the subways and a few that are on the last elevator because of the gas, which missing would mean playing the whole level again. Then at the very end, there's some cool platforming to get the last 3 without knocking the towers over. In the construction side, it can be pretty fun doing LCJs off of some of the seesaws to get up to places faster, which are still fun to use in general because of the momentum you can get. You can even use one's upwards momentum as it's being pulled to skip swinging it to get into the sticker switch area. It's convenient if you can do this part while standing on the small platform so that you can jump up to the prizes sooner, but it's not that necessary. And while you can just jump back to the main area from where the prizes are, sometimes you just don't change layer and die, so it's best just to wait for the moving platform to get out. The section to get the key can be fun with the LCJ you can do, then the RCJ to avoid having to get momentum. Then when you're done, instead of going around, you can just lower the bottom platform, then run off to keep going. And while you do normally need the enemy to reach this area in the first place, sometimes you can just reach the sponge by jumping, but it seems pretty hard. Like in the mines, the very last prize can be pretty easy to miss with how it's underneath the scoreboard, which I actually did once because apparently I'm too good at this moving LCJ that barely saves time anyway. Oh my god. I forgot I was doing 100%. I wonder if the extra time for missing it would have let me realize fast enough. This can definitely be saved though if you just pause and despawn yourself in time, which is a funny situation to do it in since it's not a risk of death like usual. I don't know why, but lately whenever I've been doing the drag race, the cars really like to flip themselves over for no reason, which kind of loses a good amount of time. I mean, it doesn't usually happen, but it's still really stupid that it's even a possibility. The only redeeming thing about this is that you can sometimes grab the other car as it catches up to you to recover, but even this can be hard. Elevation is by far the longest minigame that there is, which thankfully there is a skip for, but of course it's one of the hardest minigame skips. By co-op jumping, then doing an LCJ to get out of bounds, you can do a tricky jump to get back in bounds right next to the last elevator, saving a couple of minutes. What makes it hard is that while doing the LCJ and while doing the tricky jump, there's a good risk of getting completely stuck, forcing you to restart, and because there's no alternative for the skip, you pretty much have to attempt it. It's not too bad with practice, but it's always scary whenever there's a risk of having to restart. Other than that, I actually think it's a super cool skip. There's even a way to skip the final elevator too, by jumping off at the end, hugging the wall, and hoping that you clip back in bounds with your speed to bunny hop to the scoreboard after the slope. You can even do it on the right side of the roof, but because of how inconsistent clipping back in is, it isn't done in runs, where if you miss it you just have to restart the level as well. It's nice still being able to skip the red wheels at the end of Endurance Dojo, then at the start of Sensei's Lost Castle. The default order that the stickers are presented in are actually really slow when needing to place them, so it's best to select the mountain first. It's also fun using the wheel to fling yourself into the room, and getting the prizes out of their cages is cool. Just outside of here too, you're able to use a strat that skips a wheel in normal runs to get a prize pretty quickly. The balloon section can be interesting too with the route that you need to take, going back and forth, which is only possible because of how floaty the balloons are. The zipline at the end of the level though is one of the more annoying sections in the whole game, where no matter how slow you try to go, there's just a chance you'll bounce over some of the prizes for no reason, which you can fix just by despawning and trying again, but it's still so inconvenient. This level also has some prizes that can become unobtainable, like in the mini-boss room, and be careful when going over the electricity because being too high avoids the prize, and being too low kills you. The one at the bottom of the green wheel section is pretty hidden too. The Terrabaloni's volcano is a very unique level with needing to use the airship, but thankfully there aren't too many prizes that you need to collect while on it. There's 2 at the start, a couple at each fortress, and a few in and around the volcano. This isn't super relevant for this category, but a weird thing is that for some reason, they put invisible gas onto the piston of one of the spikes in the second fortress. It doesn't get in the way here though. Again, there is some backtracking in this level after you get one of the stickers next to the volcano, but I find it pretty fun to do with how fast the balloon can actually go. And like in the darkness, if you're familiar with running the main any percent category, you have to make sure to not death abuse after each fortress, which is easy to forget about. Daruma-san has some of the most fun movement for a minigame, with all of the slope jumps and bunny hops that you can do. Just before the restart happens in the Dancer's Court, it can actually be faster to just despawn instead of trying to move back across the snake, just because of how hard it is to move back in that direction, which is kinda funny. And since we have the ace for this level after restarting, we can freely do the death abuses at this prize near the circular moving platforms and in the ×4 area. Another kind of funny thing is that the sticker for the Taj Mahal doesn't need to be accurate at all with how the wall that is attached to also counts, which is actually nice with how thin some of the cardboard is. The LCJ off the monkey block in Elephant Temple is actually still done like it is in other categories with where the prizes happen to be, and in general, this level just has a lot of fun movement, with the bunny hopping at the moving platforms, and again, the whole ×2 area thing. There's also still that leap of faith at the end you can do, just remember to save yourself if you don't make it. Like we talked about in the islands, the snake stickers for the Switch in Great Magician's Palace are presented to you in a really bad order, so it's good to remember to not go with what's selected by default. There's also a nice trip jump that you can do to skip having to wait for the Magician's box cycle to get the key, which is nice because the cycle actually takes a while to complete. Fire Pits has another pretty significant skip for a minigame too, where the level normally makes you do 2 laps of it by having you activate this player center as you finish the first lap that creates a bridge for when you get there the second time. But of course, it's really not that hard to just do a co-op jump to reach the player center from below much earlier, which is a lot faster than doing both laps of the level. The Shifting Temple also has a few cycle skips in it, but the first one requires getting the race gate skip, then the others are kind of risky in general with how easy it is to die going for them, and with how little they save, it's not really worth it. The icicle section at the start of the frozen tundra can be kind of confusing with the split paths and the risk of things falling out of bounds, but this is how it's done. The top path is taken first, then after getting the gear sticker, the bottom path is taken backwards to then despawn and use it, where the middle path is then taken to complete this area. A very small thing is that you can actually drop down from behind the glass here, which can save some time. Then more importantly, it's possible to make it all the way to the back layer for the next section by using the bouncy platform that's found down here, which is much better than going all the way to the right and climbing up. After you get the key in this level, it can actually be worth it to despawn again just because of how far you need to walk to get back, which I find funny. Then there's a bit of a silly strat called rocket surfing, where you do exactly that to try and save a bit of time. But this is kind of risky for obvious reasons. It does look pretty cool though. One nice thing at the end of this level too is that if you happen to miss the prize coming out of the exit tunnel for the ×4 area, you can use the soldier or any other object to reach it. Also, when you're finishing the ice slide, it's possible to get crushed by some of the soldiers, so be aware of that. The prize above the first moving platform in the bunker is actually surprisingly difficult to get if you don't know the specific timing for the jump, but it could be worse. A pretty cool thing you can do is jumping straight up to the higher area near the rotor tubes as they rotate around, which is pretty easy to do. Then afterwards you can drop down in the middle while grabbing to get the key that way. The Wheel of Death really isn't that much harder in 100% as there's only one prize in the entire thing, but the prize that's found right afterwards above the electricity is probably one of the scariest in the game to collect, with the giant risk of needing to replay the whole level if you fail. It doesn't help that they made the lights in this section grabbable too, making it easy to accidentally touch them if you'd like to hold grab for no reason while doing scary jumps, like me. I swear, it just makes jumps easier if you hold grab while doing them, trust me. There's a neat respawn abuse you can do in the Collector's Lair with the backtracking to get the dog prizes, where after getting the rightmost prize, you activate this checkpoint, then jump over the previous one using the ledge, where you can despawn after getting the prize to the left. There isn't much more to mention in this level, but it is really fun saving all of the characters by pulling the levers on their cages, and then seeing them all at the end to get all of their prizes. It's very encouraging to see with only having a few levels left in the run. The tunnel before this is also really fun to do in one go with how scattered the prizes all are. There's only one prize in the Collector, so it's really just about defeating him as quickly as you can and nothing else. The only problem is the ace, since a lot of the fastest strats involve risking your life, and restarting is especially bad because of the 40 seconds long intro that this level has. So most of the time, the best thing you can do is just be as safe as possible and only do things that you're absolutely sure of. I'm not even sure if standing on the earth to activate the scoreboard earlier is safe, where even though you are activating it instantly, you still die, so I don't know. It might not be worth losing 2.5 minutes over this. Then for the last couple levels, there are some pretty cool bunny hopping strats in rotor tubes to get through the whole thing in only 1 or 2 cycles, which can be a bit risky, and being at the end of the run that might not be something that you want. Doing the race gate skip also saves the cycle though. Just be careful that Little Zim doesn't kill you, which pretty much applies to most minigames actually. There's a really risky strat in Spline Rider that's almost never worth doing, where by getting ahead of the board and waiting for it at the drop-off, you can kill a lot of its speed to let you go down the hill earlier, which is cool. I would just never do it in a run. Part of the reason being that immediately after this, the board has a couple of chances to just completely flip over and kill you, which there's basically nothing you can do about. Pretty amazing for the last level in the entire game, so I usually just don't bother stressing, and just let the fates decide how the run is going to end. Oh, and there's also the jetpack tunnel skip, but this is another thing that just isn't worth attempting. This category is a test of memory and endurance more than anything else, with its countless strategies and extensive duration, where small amounts of time are often sacrificed just to check or do things safely to potentially avoid a greater time loss later on, which obviously isn't the fastest way to play, but maybe there will come a time where the fastest runs never show any hesitation. And due to its length, there's likely still hundreds of new things to be found for this category, with even the smallest of optimizations still being out there. I can't imagine what a perfect run would look like, or even how fast it would be. As it currently stands though, with these strats and the record being at 2 hours and 36 minutes, getting below 2 hours and 30 is more than doable, and definitely the next milestone to be reached. I hope you've enjoyed this in-depth look at LBP 100% No Overlord, whether it helped explain some things about the run that you didn't know about, or just showed off more of what's possible in this great game. It really has so much to offer, so if it's something that you're at all interested in speedrunning, I'd highly recommend trying it out. There's plenty of resources and a great community that are always open to new players. I always stream it here on YouTube whenever I'm doing runs of this category, so whenever I do end up coming back to this, you'll know where to find it. Thanks for watching.